Walter Creppin turned his TV off and instantly heard the music outside. It was the neighbors. They were at it again with their outdoor organ. "Ah," he grumbled. "Ah," he grumbled again. "Ah," he added. Walter never made any effort to make coherent speech since the lockdowns. But he always had the habit of talking to himself ever since his wife died. The lockdown degenerated his speech into incoherence. At first, he would speak eloquently to himself, but after a certain point every week, he'd lose syllables, and after a month, he added a growling grunt to it. He would often say to himself, "I can't tell you what that meant, because the language is too foul." It was about his wife, who, instead of missing her at this moment, just this particular moment, he found himself mad at her. Stuffed animals. He couldn't get rid of her stuffed animals. They weren't the same since Helen died. She used to love those stuffies. Which means, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you all. But the stuffed animals just stared back at him with their plastic eyes and unchangeable cute smiles. That was the big insult in Walter's eyes. They didn't have the good taste to sob and mourn the only person who ever loved them. He would often say, hoping her ghost would hear him. He added, which meant, give me a sign. But nothing. He was all alone, and all he could ever think of was Helen. That was the one word he still spoke clearly. Helen, he said, and stayed motionless, hearing the music. He said, which meant, what kind of morons are my neighbors? All he plays is two chords over and over. Helen would laugh at him when he talked out loud instead of thinking quietly to himself. Ugh, me caveman thinking. Shh, she would jest. It's primitive, she said. I was reading, I don't know how long ago, she said, 1800 years ago, I believe. I sort of think, anyway, these people couldn't read inside of their minds. Yeah, they were because they were astounded that this guy was reading in his mind, and they deemed it as an important moment that this guy was able to read. It was like a stunt. People would write in those days by speaking, and then they'd have a scribe that would write. And so, like, a lot of the people that wrote didn't know how to read even. But that doesn't mean that, does that mean that they didn't think in their minds quietly to themselves? What does that mean? What does that little piece of information mean? I mean, information is like that. It doesn't direct you to what, it's just a clue. It's always just a clue. Anyway, it wasn't natural to read silently. So sentience is this miracle that we've been slowly evolving towards. Or maybe these people weren't representative of like the regular people everywhere, and maybe everyone around this village had like great sentience. I should have let her go on. She could go on like this. She used to be able to go on like this, Walter thought later. But then he interrupted and said, scientists say people are losing their sentience now because the internet. About 50% of people or more apparently don't have active sentience anymore. Helen lost her train of thought. I looked at her, and she was just sort of like her jaw was kind of like slacking down. See, we're developing into it's because people don't give themselves time to think anymore, Walter said. But he looked at her, and her eyes were bulging out, and then she fell back in her chair. Later, he found out it was an aneurysm that killed her. But it always felt like the story of how humans were losing sentience right now that did it. It was too powerful of a piece of information. He couldn't get that out of his mind. And here Walter was, himself devolved to the point where he doesn't even speak in words. He said, which meant if Helen saw me now, she wouldn't laugh at me. She'd be disgusted and say, I devolved. He said, which meant no words, because it was just raw emotion. He listened to his neighbor play the organ. At least, the two chords he kept playing were warm sounding, and some part deep in his brain was moved somehow. He had a hard time dragging himself to the front curtains to look out. He was mortified that they would see him. But he had to admit those two chords that they were just banging repeatedly and hypnotically were soothing. It spoke to his soul somehow. And he wanted to see it. But even peeking was hard now. After all this time of lockdown, just seeing the sunlight was hard. Everything was hard. Government people left a box of rations at his doorstep once a week, but most of the time the food was spoiled. He'd still eat it, because it was either that or starve. The taste of bread mold was always under his breath. He opened the curtains a crack with his fingers, but found himself clutching the curtains and wondering if he was going to fall down. Gums, he said, which meant, oh, Helen, I can't wait to see you. He said that because he thought he was dying. He thought maybe seeing 3 trees dancing while a man plays the organ wasn't a real thing that people see on Earth. This must be some transitional phase where reality itself glitches, he thought to himself, but no. He never fell down, and everything in his living room sure looked real. Walter picked up the coffee table. It was light. It was real. It felt real. He said, which meant, nothing seems real. Nothing seems real. Is this a dream? It was just a dream. It's just a dream, he was thinking. Okay, dream, take this. And he picked up the coffee table and he threw it across the room and watched it smash into the long rectangular glass covering a watercolor painting of an old Montreal apartment building hanging over the sofa. He screamed over and over until he sat down on the floor looking at his carnage while he listened to these 2 chords hypnotically relaxing him as he peeked out and watched the trees. He noticed the yellow-haired woman with the nose ring was tied onto her chair. If they still had an active police force, he'd report that. He could feel Helen inside of him urging him to report them or confront them somehow. But then he noticed the woman smiling and looking up to the 2 other people, her neighbors. She was looking at them with love in her eyes. Walter said, which meant, I wish Helen and I had kids. I'm so lonely. Walter had nobody now, no family, no friends. They were all Helen's friends, really. Nobody in the world knew Walter was even there, except for a delivery person that gave him moldy bread once a week. They packed up and went inside, leaving Walter all alone. He opened the curtains wide and stared at the open night street, but soon regretted his proximity. He felt watched, but there was nothing there but the 3 trees. He quickly looked behind him and he said, "Blackham." But he thought he said Helen, because maybe it was Helen's ghost looking at me, Walter thought. He distinctly felt he was being watched, and still he called for Helen again and again. But then it dawned on him. He looked out the window and his heart thumped. It was the 3 trees watching him. He said, which means, those 3 trees are looking at me. And then, which meant, because they suspect I have an electric organ too. Wow, he said, which means, and I do. So Walter dug out Helen's old electric organ. She used to jam on weekends with 3 other women that played organ. They were all really chubby, and they would play all together, and he'd sit in the middle of the room drinking port while Helen played with the chubby woman. Sometimes it was beautiful. Other times it was a cacophony. Still, it was the ultimate quadraphonic sound experience. Walter remembered leaning his head back and watching her play, filling the room with this pure feeling that vibrated through the whole body. Only the organ does this, he thought. Only the organ does this, and rolled an extension cord across the street while he had this cherished memory in his mind. The organ. I'm going to resurrect this organ. And he set it up and started playing it for the trees. He wasn't good at playing it, but he did the same couple of chords his neighbor did and kept it up. Sure enough, as he saw earlier, the trees started to sway back and forth. No, dance. The trees danced, and Walter felt happy. He felt true happiness in his whole body, in his whole heart, in his whole mind for the first time since Helen was still alive. He played for a few minutes before he heard Robert's voice. Hello. And he kept on playing. At first he didn't think it was real until Robert kept saying, hello. Yes, it's me, the tree. I'm a tree. Robert, for some reason, felt silly. Why ever say he's a boy, really? Why bother? Why make it that level of complexity? Just being a tree is enough. Hayden and William both had a psychic link with Robert, so they both knew what he was up to as well. And it's true, Hayden thought. Why did we make such a fuss about controlling how people were supposed to perceive us when we were boys? Why do strangers have to perceive us? Why do we control how can we control how people perceive us? Why do strangers know our private and personal knowledge of ourselves? Why do they have to? We 3 know we're really boys at heart, but to this guy, undeniably, we're trees. Why make every conversation about who I really am? We could never get a natural conversation about it when we were humans. Let's let this guy think we're trees. That's as natural as we can get. Because we are trees, William added. And Hayden said, "How much more natural can anyone get than being a tree?" And the three of them started singing "We Are the Trees," a song that they wrote, but mostly it was Hayden that wrote it. The organ. Walter played the organ, and finally when Walter tried to speak, he said, "Blam." But this time, it even surprised Walter, because he didn't hear it as a coherent sentence. He just heard it as grunts. He heard it how everybody else heard it. And he tried again, but he only heard a grunt again. "You lost your power to speak," Hayden said. "That's what happened to the three of us." Walter grunted. "Don't use your mouth, use your mind. That's what we're doing. Try it, just your mind." Hello? Walter said in the mind space. "See? You can do it," Hayden said. I'm Walter. My wife died." He didn't know why he said that, but somehow it seemed to define everything about him. "Oh no," all the trees thought, and they felt such sympathy for Walter. "Are you lonely, Walter?" Robert asked. "I used to be very lonely. Very lonely. I used to be so lonely. I used to be out there on the front of that driveway, and I thought I was the loneliest tree that ever existed. But then I met these two, William and Hayden. Hello, hey!" They both gave their salutations. "You got us too, anytime you want," Hayden added. They all reassured Walter. His loneliness was palpable to them due to their psychic link. They knew it. They felt the very depth of his soul because he allowed them to. "But now I have my tree friends," Robert said. The three trees giggled among themselves, but Walter didn't seem to notice, probably on account of everything being so overwhelming to him. To him, like trees. Maybe trees always giggle. It didn't mean a conspiracy was about. It was just a prank, really. It wasn't really even a conspiracy. The boys just were fooling him. They still felt like they were fooling him, but they weren't, because they were trees. Or were they? Everybody knows that trees don't talk or dance. "We're boys," the three trees confessed to him at once. "I know," Walter said. "That's what you seem to be." He didn't need explanation, because he started playing the organ. Walter heard the neighbor's door slam, but he didn't pay too much heed. He didn't know how to play the organ, really, but the trees loved it when he played just those two chords. Just like the other guy, Walter thought. Just like the other guy. And he played his heart away, even if he was only playing two chords and didn't even know how to play. Through his peripheral vision, he saw the neighbor come marching toward him. But Walter didn't care. He was too transfixed by the warm sound of the two simple chords. He knew it was really such simple things that could make it all worthwhile, he thought. And he was taken out of his pleasant thoughts when Sam, his neighbor, said, Nucky, Didn't we talk about playing the organ late at night before? Then when Walter said, Sam, Nucky's neighbor, noticed that it wasn't Nucky playing the organ, and that the trees seemed to be dancing. He thought he heard, "Hello, Daddy." That can't be possible, Sam thought, so he shrugged it off. My son. That sounded like my son. "Hello, Daddy. Daddy, it's me. It's Robert." That can't be, it must be my mind. My son is most likely dead, he thought. "I'm not dead, Daddy." And it seemed to Sam that it was coming from the tree. But again, Sam just shrugged it off, being a practical man, knowing that trees don't speak. "Daddy, I'm Robert." Sam looked at the tree and said, he turned to the man that he thought was Nucky and said, "I must be losing my mind. Can I trouble you to help me to my door?" Walter just said, "Yum." Sam looked at Walter with a puzzled expression that slowly came to a realization that in spite of the idiotic statement he just made, his eyes held such visible pathos that Sam felt that he knew what the grunt meant. And he looked at the tree like as if he was seeing a ghost. "Daddy, it's me. Robert? Daddy, my son. We thought we lost you forever. Robert. Father and son reconnected. His mother came out, and they were all together after all this time, with so many forces trying to cleave them apart for so long. They felt so fortunate and so thankful to be together at last. The next morning, Nucky woke up and cursed the day. Another day he wasn't allowed to go to work at the Ontario Tree Department, so he could pay for something better than the moldy crackers on his plate. But this, Nucky thought, this doesn't have to be my fate. I'll get to town, sell these flowers, and buy some chocolate bars. Meat. I need meat. We all need meat, he thought to himself. The reason why he cursed the day every morning was he kept dreaming of meat. And he'd wake up knowing moldy crackers are the only option. "Nucky!" he heard Barb scream to him. She was always awake hours before Nucky. His first thought was it was about Patty. But the scream didn't sound stressed, so he didn't run or panic. "Nucky, quick! Nucky!" she yelled. "I know you're awake. I heard you. Come on, you gotta see this before they go away." He walked down the hall to the living room. Patty was sipping a tea, and Barb was peeking out of the window through the curtains, calling Nucky to her with her hand gestures. Come on. Nucky gave Barb a good morning kiss first, and looked through the crack in the curtains in the window and saw their neighbors, Sam and Wilma Fenderson, hugging one of the trees in the front yard. Both of their eyes were closed and the tree's branches rested on their backs, hugging them in return.
Find out next chapter. Will the other trees' parents find them too? Will Walter ever speak coherently again? Can Nucky sell the flowers for good money to buy chocolate bars and meat Find out next chapter in Nucky Gulliver's Travels.
Hi, check out the links below and like and subscribe. And the links below have El Shaddai 2. That's the first one you should buy. That's my book. I'm a comic book. I have a Trump book. Whether you love him or whether you hate him or whether you're just like, what the heck is going on? This humor book. This is a humor book, but it's really about human perception. And then my other books, you see them down below. It's great stuff. I draw, write, I do everything, like even the lettering. Nobody helps me. I mean, nobody helps me with the art. You could help me just by liking, subscribing, and sharing. Thank you. Thank you very much.